So welcome back, and thank you for joining the other side of the cell. My name is Michael Jackson. I'm here to talk to you about different subjects about prison setting and working in a prison. And today we're going to talk about my first day. My first day as a correctional employee in a prison. So to get you up to speed, I have been in corrections for about 26 years. I worked in the same facility, so I've seen a lot of things. I started back in November 23rd of 1998, which I'm sure is a long time to you youngsters, but that's when I started. It was Thanksgiving week of that year, and my first day in corrections was very interesting. So let's go back. Before I ever went into corrections, I'd worked many different jobs, but a couple of those jobs prepared me for corrections. And I worked in a juvenile facility with a bunch of male juvenile boys for several years. And then I worked also with mentally handicapped and mentally impaired people who were basically criminally insane, and they could not be placed in a prison, so they were in a facility with group homes. So I worked with those people for a long time, and eventually there was an opening, and it came at the local prison that was about 20 miles away from my hometown. And we're talking in rural West Virginia, so it's out in the middle of nowhere. So when you apply for a job in a correctional facility or a prison, there's steps to it. You don't just fill out an application and walk in and they get hired. So back then, you applied for the job, you waited because it took a long time to get on, because it was a state job with state benefits, and it was a coveted job. So those jobs didn't come open very often. So for me, I applied for the job, and it took me about 6 to 8 months to get on, just to get the interview. So once I got the interview, went up, had a 3-panel persons on the interview board. You did your interview. Fortunately, I did well in my interview, got the job. But that's not when you start. After you get the job, you have to go through a background check. You have to do a urinalysis, which means you pee in a cup and they test you for drugs or whatever. You have to go through a psychological on paper, which means you take the 500 question test. And then after all that, there is a security person who was the major at that time. He came to your house and did an in-person interview. And then after that, you did an interview with a psychologist who questioned you about your mental state, because working in corrections is a mentally tough job. And there's certain people that are built for it and certain people that are not. So you got to understand that when you go into a correctional facility, you better be mentally tough, because inmates will eat you alive. That's just the bottom line. They'll eat you alive. So for me, what I had to do is I had to understand that I was going into a prison of 1,200 men, and I was going to be one of the only 1 or 2 black employees in that whole facility. So I had a couple of different dynamics going into this job. So my first day, it was a 20-minute drive from my house to the prison. So in that 20 minutes, all you think about is all the horrible things that could possibly go on in a prison that you was getting ready to walk into. So For me, I'm thinking about there's 1,200 men in here and they're all killers and it's going to be horrible. Well, that's really not the case, but that's the way you think. So anyway, I drive up to the prison for that 20 minutes and you're thinking all these thoughts. Pull up to the prison. There's an officer at the front gate. The officer at the front gate comes out, greets you, and asks you what your purpose is at the prison. You tell them you're a new employee. They take your driver's license, write all your information down, write your vehicle information down, license plate and so forth, and then they call you into the building. Well, I pull up, do all that, then proceed to the parking space, get out and go into the building. When you walk into the building, there's two doors. There's the first door you enter into and it shuts. The one thing you notice whenever your first day working in a correctional facility is the noise and doors slamming and locking behind you. It is very startling and it's very uncomfortable because doors in prisons weigh several hundred pounds because they're steel. So every time one of those doors shuts, it jars because it's so weighted. But anyway, go in, you check in with the switchboard. The switchboard lady calls the human resources person. The human resource person comes to the other door. They open the door and you go through the secondary door. Then you go in, you do your paperwork. They release you to your supervisor and tell you where to go. So my first day I did all that. I met my supervisor. My supervisor was a lady. We're just going to call her Peggy for these purposes. I met her. She came down, got me, and you go from that part of the building, you go into the control command part of the building. We call it the control center. But basically the control center is a big glassed-in bubble that's like a fortress. It's got glass all around it, and there's people in there with radios, telephones, and communications. So basically it's the hub of the prison. It's where everything is directed through and from. So when you start out as a correctional employee, they only give you a couple things. They give you an ID, they give you a set of keys, and you have to check out a radio. And that's basically what you get to start. So first day, get in, do all that kind of stuff. They issue you that stuff, and then my boss said, well, we'll go down to the unit where you're going to be working. So the facility I worked in is basically a big square, and it's huge. We're talking, 100 yards down the hallway or whatever. It's just very long, and it's a big square that you can walk around and come back around to the same place. So the unit I worked on was on the north side of the building. So if you walked in and the control center was in front of you, you go left or right. Left is the south side, right is the north side. Well, I worked on the north side of the building, so once we got to control, we took the right and you went down the hallway. The first part of the hallway is where my unit was, and that was Unit D. So if you imagine, there's an office, and then to one side there's the first level dormitory, and then on the other side you go up 2 flights of steps to the second and third floor for the other 2 dorms. So there's 3 dorms and 1 office. So basically my boss said, we just need to take a tour so I can show you around and let you see what, where you're going to be working and the inmates that you're going to be working with. So she takes me out and we go to the right, and we go upstairs to the first dorm, which was dorm 8. And then the second dorm is dorm 9 on top. The dynamics of those 2 dorms were this. Dorm 8 was all white dorm. Dorm 9 was all black dorm. So the dynamics of those 2 dorms are very different. So we go up on 8, and when you walk into the dorm to your left, there's a day room, like a common area, where you have 2 or 3 TVs, some microwaves, and picnic table type things that are bolted to the floor. And that's where they gather and watch TV and stuff like that. When you go to the right, it is a barrack style dormitory. So there's no cells. This is a dormitory. You have 20 some guys on each side lined up with huge wooden locker boxes at the foot of the beds. So as you're walking up on these dorms, the inmates know everything. So the inmates know everybody and everything in the prison. So there, they see me and they know that I'm new, and they know that I'm different because I'm the only black male employee in the whole building. But they don't know who I am yet. So they're trying to figure out who this black guy is walking on this dorm with Peggy. And they're kind of figuring I probably might be a new staff person. So as we're walking and she's talking, because they're all coming up and saying stuff to her because they're trying to talk to her to get at me and assess me, because inmates are always measuring people up and assessing people. So they're trying to figure out who I am. So they're talking to her about, different things about, have you found out anything about my parole, or do you know this or you know that? And they're just chit-chatting with her. And when we're walking down through, you could hear comments like, they're not yelling it, but they're saying it loud enough so you could hear it, like, fresh meat. I bet you that's a new staff person or whatever. So my thinking in my process is, don't show fear and don't react to them at all. So that's the way I did it. So you can't show fear in prison. Even if you're scared, you can't show it. So I didn't. So we do the tour of dorm 8, then we go up to dorm 9. Dorm 9 was a total different vibe for me, because dorm 9, there's all blacks, and they're all looking at me like I'm a freaking unicorn. Like, who is this cat, and what is he doing in here? He can't possibly be a staff person. So they're trying to talk to her and say, parse out little questions to where they're trying to figure out who I am. And she says, well, this is going to be your counselor. He's going to be part of our unit team. So they're happy at first, but as my career goes on, that happiness turns, because they think that I'm going to do special favors for them, and I can't, because that's just not the way that's going to work. But anyway, so we do the tour of those 2 dorms, and we come back down and we go to dorm 7. Well, dorm 7's dynamic of that dorm, and each dorm in prison has a different personality. So we go down on 7, and 7 is more of a mixture of different types of inmates. You have some weaker inmates, you got some older inmates, you got inmates that might have a medical pass that they can't go up and down stairs, so they're on 7. So as we're walking on 7, same dynamic, day rooms, and then you got the barrack style, 44 men. So as we're walking that dorm, a particular inmate shows up. He's an older gentleman in his late 60s, a little Italian fellow. His name's Carlos. And Carlos is a bank robber. And Carlos has been in prison for probably 30 years. Older fellow. And Carlos looks at me and he says, hey man, what's your name? I said, my name is Michael. What's your name? And he said, my name is Carlos. You know who I am? And I said, no, I don't. This is my first day, so I'm kind of just taking the tour and trying to figure things out. He said, well, I'm a bank robber. And I said, okay. Sounds like a profession, but one that I wouldn't want to be a part of. And he says, I got a question for you. And I said, okay, I've got an answer for you. What's your question? And he says, what would you do if I took a gun and stuck it in your face and said, give me your fucking wallet? And I looked at him and I thought, well, I thought this to myself, I better come up with a pretty good answer to this question because this guy's testing me. So in my mind, I figure I'm gonna shoot my shot now and get this out of the way, because this is going to determine a lot, because there's like 10 inmates kind of gathered around within earshot, kind of looking to see what this interaction and how it was going to go. So I said, like I said, he said to me, what would you do if I stuck a gun in your face and said, give me your fucking wallet? I said, well, probably what I would do in that circumstance is, as soon as you try to pull the gun away, the gun out of your pocket and stick it in my face, I would probably try to grab the gun, take it from you, and knock your fucking teeth out of your mouth. And he looked stunned, like he didn't believe that came out of my mouth. So he sat there, paused for a minute, and he looked at Peggy and said, hey, I think that guy's going to be all right. And that was it. He walked away. And back in them days, they rolled cigarettes because they were allowed to smoke, and he had a rolled cigarette in his mouth. He took it out and went, I think he's going to be all right, Miss Peg. And he walked away, and that was the end of it. But the long story short of that is, over time, me and that particular inmate developed a pretty good rapport, because I was able to, get him a phone call when his mom died, helped him with some other things, and we developed a respect relationship over time. And I think if I would have showed signs of weakness and stuff like that, they would have ate me alive. So it ended up turning out good for me. Now, would you do that in all circumstances or in different facilities? Probably not. But for me and my circumstance, it worked out perfectly, and it did what it needed to do at that time. So my first day in the correctional facility was pretty interesting, and as the weeks went on, I had more experiences like that, but that was my first day, and I'll never forget it. And it helped mold and put the word out that you're not going to run over this guy. This guy is not going to allow that to happen, so you're going to have to deal with him in a certain way. And I'll never forget that. And Carlos is dead and gone by now, but he was an interesting character. But the thing that Miss Peg told me, said Carlos always does that to do staff people, because he wants to see what kind of staff person you're going to be. And that was a test, and you passed the test. So I passed the test and I moved on, and hopefully in the upcoming videos that we'll have some more interesting stories, things that you would like to hear. And put your comments down below and tell me what types of issues you want us to talk about, what kind of things you want to hear from us, and we'll put them together and we'll do those types of videos for you. So like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.